Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We have Jim Nagy, Executive Director of the Senior Bowl, on with us this week to talk all things Patriots, because guess what? Turns out the Patriots still love the Senior Bowl. They took 5 Senior Bowlers this year, including second-round pick Keion White, who we will dive much deeper into his fit with the Patriots, how Bill Belichick will plan on using him, how teams around the league view Keion White's fit in the NFL, just how rare a specimen he is athletically. Really, really interesting player, really interesting demeanor as well. We'll talk about why we think he's a seamless fit in New England because of that particular characteristic or those particular traits, both on the field and off the field. Demeanor, very interesting with Keion White. But before we get into Keion White, before we get into my 17 game prediction for the Patriots in 2023, we go game by game by game. Let's get to our conversation with Jim Nagy because he's the guy with the info. He's the guy you want to listen to. Here he is right now. All right, there he is, Jim Nagy, Executive Director of the Senior Bowl. Unbelievable year again for Senior Bowl participants in this year's draft class. Excited to ask Jim about a couple that have found their way to Foxborough. Jim, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, Phil, good to be on again.
The numbers are wild, man. 36 of the top 100, 38 in the first 3 rounds, 100 drafted. Almost 40% of the entire draft class came through Mobile this year. And 2 of the first 3 Patriots picks this year, and 5 total. One of the most heavy Senior Bowl draft classes in the NFL are right here in New England with the Patriots. No surprise, the Patriots always plucking Senior Bowl guys. But I wanted to ask you first, Jim, about their draft class as a group. Did this look like a classic Patriots draft to you? You're such a great resource for us because not only do you know these players as well as you do, but you spent so much time here in New England and you know what Bill Belichick has wanted traditionally.
Well, to me, it was an effective draft. It wasn't the flashiest draft, but what do you expect? You know, the Pats aren't a real flashy organization. They're just an effective organization, right? So, they had some clear needs to start the draft weekend, and I feel like they addressed them. You know, you can never address everything, but I know there's just from the outside looking in, there was people critical of their special teams last year. I think they took every step they could possibly take to address in special teams with, the punter and the kicker and a couple core guys late in the draft that can really, really run on the perimeter, like core special teams players. And, they upgraded the competition on the offensive line, and they added a couple of versatile pieces on defense. So, you're looking to come away from those 3 days addressing needs. And I feel like the Pats did that.
Well, you mentioned versatile pieces on defense. Their second and third round picks, both defenders, both Senior Bowl guys, both, it looks like, really versatile and tough too. I think they added toughness really throughout days 2 and 3, especially of this draft. But I want to ask you about Keion first. I know a lot of people thought he might be a first round pick. I think the Patriots were looking at him, quite frankly, as a first round pick. He gets to them in the second round. Why should Patriots fans, Jim, be excited to have Keion White in New England?
Yeah. You say that they got tougher. I mean, you see Keion's reaction when they drafted him. He looked like a tough dude, didn't he? He was probably, he probably thought he was going in the first round. We thought he was for sure. We had 7 or 8 guys that we thought could go in the first round, Keion being one of those guys. But no, they got a really versatile player. And our background with Keion goes, back 3 or 4 years. We were watching a player, I think for the 2020 game or 2021 game, an Old Dominion player named O'Shane Ximines, who went in the 3rd round of the Giants. I believe O'Shane's still with the Giants. And this other young guy just kept popping, flashing on the tape. And, we're watching tape with our scouting assistants, and I'll usually throw questions out at those guys as we watch the tape. I'm like, guys, who's this young cat? And they looked up his number, and he was only a redshirt freshman or something at the time, or a sophomore. And it was Keion. And, and I'm like, read me the bio. Like, what's the story on this guy? And he played tight end the year before. And that year on tape, he had 19 tackles for loss. I think he was, one of the top 2 or 3 guys in the country that year in TFLs as a first-year defensive player. So what does that tell you? It tells you can find the football, that's for sure. and it tells you he's got disruptive ability behind the line of scrimmage without even looking at the tape. You can see that on paper and figure that part out. So now you fast forward to this year, and we were kind of zeroed in on Keion all year. And, if they're running an odd front up there, I don't know what the plan is for them. I haven't talked to those guys. I talked to some of those guys, leading into the draft and on draft weekend, but not since they've taken Keion. So I don't know what the plan would be there, but, he could be a jumbo outside linebacker. I mean, this guy's played on his feet a bunch. He's 285 pounds, 200. When I called up there in November, he was 292. So he was playing at 292, 293 pounds. There's a couple clips that if you follow us on Twitter or some of the draft weekend coverage of Keion, he's running 30, 40 yards down the field with running backs against the games that stick out are like Virginia, Georgia. So you're talking about a big man that can really run. They moved him up and down the front there at Georgia Tech. I think you can reduce him inside to get some pass rush out of him, which we did at Senior Bowl a bunch. The thing that I like most about him is, it's hard to win quick in the NFL like you can in college. I mean, you really have to be skilled as a pass rusher. You got to be really fast. You got to be powerful. But you're going to get stuck. You're going to get, that initial rush is going to get cut off and sometimes die in it. Some guys die in it, and some guys, stay alive and transition to a second or third move and get some extra effort pressure. And that's what Keion does really well. So I do think his best football is still ahead of him because he's, relatively still a really young defensive player, having been a tight end just a handful of years ago. So, man, as a guy, kind of one of those chess pieces that Coach Belichick likes to take, it made a lot of sense for where they took him. And obviously tremendous value too, when you're talking about a guy that they were probably considered in the first round.
I'm curious, Jim, if he reminds you of anybody that would have been on the Patriots roster while you were working for New England. There's one comp, and now he wasn't playing a 292, I don't think. But Ted Johnson is up here with us now and doing a lot of radio and doing some TV stuff with us as well. And I was talking with him on a show recently where he said, this guy reminds me a little bit of Willie. He reminds me a little bit of Willie McGinest. Just he's so big, but he's also such a good athlete that he could rush the passer. He can run with a back on a wheel route if he needed to. Does that comp make sense to you, or is there somebody else that you envision when you think about Keion in this defense?
That's a really hard one. Again, 292 pounds. I mean, we had guys that would have been like Jarvis Green back when I was there. Right. Jarvis was like 295 or whatever he was. But yeah, in terms of being able to, a big guy that can run, I mean, Willie'd probably be the closest thing. But Willie was longer. You'll see him at camp. Like Willie had a different body type. So I can see that with Ted. I mean, obviously Ted knows those guys even better than I do. But he's unique. He's a hard guy to comp.
And how about with Marte? I mean, Marte is such an interesting case coming from Sacramento State. The story, the background, a little reminiscent of the Patriots' first pick from back in 2020, second round guy, Kyle Duggar, who was with you guys down in Mobile and lit it up and took off from there, lit it up at the combine and ends up being a really key player in this Patriots defense. Is that the kind of role you envision for Marte in New England, Jim, or is he a little bit different player in your opinion?
Yeah, a little different. They're both hybrid guys, so I understand kind of the comparison, and they're similar size wise, but they're different. First of all, the difference is like we were on Kyle Duggar from the jump. The previous May, right after that draft, Ryan Florence, who is the kind of the area scout, combine scout down in that part of the country for the Seahawks, which was my last team. Ryan Florence, a good friend of mine, and he'd already been through the spring. He'd been through all the schools, getting kind of minding the country for the next year's players. And he hit me up probably even before that draft that year and was like, man, I just saw a height, weight, speed, safety at Lenore Ryan in North Carolina. He's like, Nags, you got to get on this guy. So got an early heads up from Ryan Florence on that one, tip the cap to him. And so we watched a bunch of, Kyle Duggar tape, and we posted a bunch of stuff on social media about Kyle Duggar that summer. And then we went and saw him play in the fall, and he was really an easy guy. So we were on him. We weren't on Marte Mapu, and that's I'll raise my hand on that one. We didn't do a good job on Mapu through our process. We had a couple West Coast guys, and he kind of slipped through our cracks. And what happened inevitably, back traditionally, the Senior Bowl could always pull guys from the Shrine Game or the NFLPA game that had good weeks. Well, when the NFL moved the Shrine Game into Senior Bowl week, we're only really pulling from the NFLPA game now. And so that week, I wish I could show you my cell phone that's sitting here. I probably literally have 60 to 80 texts, probably somewhere in that range, of agents that were hitting me up about, hey, my guy's the best player out here. Like, all the scouts are saying that he belongs in Mobile and you guys got to pull him up. And I had an answer for all those guys because I'd seen all the tape. We'd watched all those players. But when Marte's agent reached out, I didn't have an answer for him. So I said, let me do the work. We did a poor job here. Let me circle the wagons. And I give credit to Dane Vandernat, who's the director of the NFLPA game. And Dane gave me access to their practice tape. I watched that. He immediately jumped out. Just, the straight line closing speed, the physicality, the explosiveness on contact. So then we jumped to the Sac State tape, which we had here at the office, and watched some of that, and it was easy. So the next morning, I texted his agent and said, "Let's go. Let's get him on the first flight out after that PA game." And so he showed up here and had 2 really good days of practice before getting injured, and made a huge impact. Man, he's a really unique player. Like I said, comparing him and Doug's a better change of direction athlete. He's a little more fluid of an athlete. To me, he's a guy that is truly a sub down. You can play him in some sub downs linebacker stuff because of the size, but really to me, he's a versatile safety piece. Whereas Mapu's more like strong safety to will linebacker. And I really think you're going to want this guy playing in the box because he plays bigger than his size. I mean, 220, 219, he hits like a ton of bricks. I mean, this guy's snap on contact is just like different. During our 9-on-7 periods here in Mobile, I've posted some clips of that. I mean, this guy plays downhill and just buckles people. So it's hard to find. He's a really unique player. I've described him. I've comped him a little bit to Telvin Smith, who I did coming out of Florida State and was only like 217, 218 at Florida State, and ended up being a really good player for a handful of years for the Jacksonville Jaguars. To me, he's got some Telvin Smith to him. And to me, he's a really unique, kind of undersized in the box linebacker, but he's got length. He's 220, but he's got 33.5-inch arms, whatever they ended up measuring, really long. So just a really cool piece, a really unique player. So it didn't surprise me that Coach Belichick would take an interest in him.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's interesting to hear you comp Marte and Duggar. And I think there's a feeling in Foxborough now, hey, Devin McCourty's gone. Hey, can Kyle maybe play a little bit deeper for us occasionally, even though he's been so good in the box and he can really hit as well for somebody his size. But maybe you can use that change of direction stuff that you mentioned with Kyle sort of at a free safety spot, and maybe Marte can kind of fill in and do a lot of the stuff that Kyle's been doing the last couple of years more in the box. That'd be really interesting to just see how all those pieces move around now that McCourty has moved on. Was there one, you have posted some unbelievable clips with Marte. Was there one hit or one play that really spoke to you, Jim? Obviously you'd watched a bunch of tape by that point with him in Mobile, but was there one play in person where your eyebrows kind of shot to the sky and said, okay, I'm glad we got this guy here?
Yeah. And it wasn't my eyebrows. It was Mike Tomlin's eyebrows. We were standing on the field, and Mike Tomlin is up in the middle of everything during Senior Bowl week. If you've ever been to Mobile, like, it's funny, we have, Senior Bowl photographers on the field every day, and you get hundreds and hundreds of pictures. So, you roll through those enough, and it's like Mike Tomlin's like, where's Waldo? Like, he's in about every stinking picture. But we were watching 9-on-7 together one day, and I think it probably was the play that I posted of him blowing up a fullback who ended up being a 7th-round pick to San Fran, Braden Willis, really good player from Oklahoma. And Marte met him in the hole, knocked him back, made the tackle. And Mike Tomlin looked over at me, kind of wide-eyed, like, wow. Again, it was unusual the force that he hits with and the impact and just the noise it makes when Marte hits people. Wait till training camp, man. You're going to be hearing it a bunch. I always say some of the best players are the ones you can scout with your ears and not just your eyes. And you can scout Marte with your ears.
I love that. And I think Patriots fans will be really excited to know what Mike Tomlin values in terms of toughness and all the big hits that he's seen in the AFC North over the years. For him to be impacted by Marte that way is a great, great sign. I want to ask you about Jake Andrews here too, from Troy, Jim. It makes a lot of sense that the Patriots be interested. Cole Popovich, former offensive line coach here, is coaching him at Troy. So you assume that he knows the way that the Patriots, want to play
at that position. And Dante Scarnecchia for years has told us smart, tough, athletic enough those are the three things that he's looking for at that position. Let's I guess just talk about the intelligence though. How did that football IQ maybe show up when he was at the Senior Bowl with you guys?
Well, he played both guard and center. I sat in on one offensive line meeting but not enough to really draw, but no, he didn't have any problems, and he didn't at Troy either. We're real close to those guys, real close with their head coach, John Summerall up there at Troy, did a phenomenal job this year, reeling off 10 wins in a row for that Troy program, really in a ridiculous bounce back year. But no, I mean, my background with Jake, he wasn't really on the radar last summer too much. We knew he had a couple years of eligibility left. Most of those G5 guys exhaust their eligibility. And I was at the Auburn-Penn State game. I want to say that was like week 3. And, obviously what scouts do, we're down on the field and talking to each other, like, where have you been? Who have you seen? For us, it's like, who do we need to get on? Like, is there anyone through fall camp or these first couple of weeks that's popping out to you? And a couple guys, brought up Jake because they just come from there, Troy and Auburn. If you don't know Alabama geography, they're within an hour. They're pretty close. So they're like, yeah, Nags, you got to get through and check out that center at Troy. Some director level guys, over the top scouts are starting to go through there. And the interesting part, I mean, aside from the last name thing, is that to me, it's a really cool succession plan if that's what it's going to be. And I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. You draft a guy in the early 4th round. They probably could have traded out of that play. I mean, those picks in the early 4th on day 3 are really valuable. I'm sure the phone was ringing and people were trying to get up and get a guy they were targeting on Friday night when they had their meeting after day 2. So the fact that they stayed put and took Jake, it makes sense that the Patriots value the guy. But aside from the name, it's the body type of the player. He and David Andrews are both kind of sawed off body type guys. And so to me, what's cool when you marry up a vet and a young player is they learn the tricks of the trade. And, if David Andrews were like a taller, more angular built center, and you got kind of Jake, who's, like I said, a little more dense, and he couldn't apply the same things. He couldn't use the same tricks, but they're almost identical body types. Wait till you see him at camp. They're very similar guys. Scouting David when he came out of Georgia. And so he'll be able to pass a lot on. He'll be able to pass on a lot of wisdom and just some ways of doing things. And that's what David's relied on his whole career, right? He went undrafted for a reason. He didn't have prototype traits, physical traits. So he's learned how to play with what he's got, and he can pass a lot of that knowledge on to Jake, which is awesome.
That's really interesting how you discuss the body types and how things, could make for more of a seamless transition whenever that transition happens. I think back, right before David, and these guys are actually teammates briefly, but Brian Stork was here, and Brian Stork was like a tall, angular center. I think he was, 6'4", 6'5", and just a huge guy compared to David. And so there's some different things, I guess, that you could do there. And it sounds like he's got that versatility too, until he takes over that role, to be able to be that super sub that they really like, that every team really wants on the interior. Jim, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the specialists, because you had the 2 specialists in. I heard I don't think I'd ever heard this before. Maybe I'm not asking enough about specialists before the draft. Maybe that's why. But I had heard that Bryce Behringer had a great combine, and that stood out. And I'm thinking to myself, man, it's sort of a sterile environment for a kicker. You're indoors, you're in Indy. But Mobile, little different in the wintertime, especially. You guys can get some elements down there, even though you're down south. How did he perform in Indy? And same with Chad, because they're obviously going to be dealing with elements here. I don't know how bad it was, in terms of wind and things like that in Mobile, but what did you see from those guys that gives them some promise?
Yeah, we were lucky. We had a pretty good weather week this year. We avoided any rain. We didn't have to go inside at all. Day 1 was beautiful. People got sunburned day 1, and it was like 76 degrees and sunny. But
I remember seeing a lot of interviews of people that had been at the Senior Bowl and just beat red. Man, they're getting a little vacation time in there too down there now. Yeah, my boy McShay got a little sunburn that day. But they both had really good weeks, and the cool part was they were together, and they trained together leading up to the Senior Bowl too, because I think they might have the same agent, or they were training at the same place. But I did get a phone call, and they're like, "Are they on the same team? Or are they on the same team?" And I'm like, "Yes, we'll put them on the same team. Just chill out, relax."
so they have a really, I mean, that's, incredible kind of chemistry that they have together. And yeah, Bryce was booming it. We have the balls chipped with the Zebra technology data that, same Zebra stuff that the NFL uses. All 32 teams have Zebra technology in their facilities. And so, yeah, some of his like ball flight stuff. I mean, it tests distance and hang time and all that stuff. And Bryce's stuff was off the charts, in relation to like the last 6 or 7 years here at the Senior Bowl. And we've had some really good ones, including Jake from Stanford, Jake
Bailey. Yeah.
Jake Bailey.
Yeah, right.
Jake was down here and even in relation to Jake. So Bryce had a monster week. And then, Chad Ryland's a cool player, Eastern Michigan guy. That's my home state. So still keep a close tabs on those Michigan MAC schools, where a bunch of my buddies played in high school and after high school. But, and then he transfers to Maryland this year. And I was actually watching the Michigan-Maryland game on TV, and I'm a Michigan grad, so I try to catch my Wolverines when I can on TV if I'm not at a game. And Ryland hit a couple 50-yarders against Michigan, and I was like, whoa, who is this guy? And then I go back and watch the tape, and he's got some clutch to him, man. He's good from 60 plus. He hit one at his pro day, hit a long one that I posted a video of from his pro day that looked like a 60-yarder. So he's good from that. He's good from distance, and he's good in the elements. You kick at Eastern Michigan, I mean, you're going to be kicking in some tough stuff. I mean, that's Ypsilanti, Michigan in October and November can be cold and nasty. And so he's kicked in those elements, and he's kicked some big ones in critical situations. So I know, back in my time in New England, you're always looking for specialists that are good in those elements. And you're talking about, I mean, it's going to say Maryland on the card, but you're talking about a 4-year guy from Ypsilanti, Michigan, and you're talking about, Bryce Behringer from East Lansing. So those guys are going to they are not going to have issues up in the Foxborough elements.
And when you talk about succession plans, you need a punter now that Jake Bailey has moved on. Nick Folk, as steady as he's been the last couple of years, you got to start thinking about the future. Obviously, we're guilty of it here too in the media space, but fans as well. They're thinking about 2023 and 2023 alone for the most part. But Bill Belichick and his staff obviously thinking a little bit more ahead with a lot of these guys. Well, Jim, thank you so much for teaching us more about these Senior Bowl guys every year. I mean, we mentioned Duggar, but Mac Jones, Cole Strange, so many others. And now to talk about these guys, especially Keion White and Marte as second and third round picks. This has been huge for you to be able to teach us a little bit about them. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, Phil, thanks for asking me back on.
The NBA playoffs are here, and you can turn crossovers into cash with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/NBCSB right now and place a $5 bet, and you'll get an instant $150 in bonus bets. That's win or lose. FanDuel is so easy to use. You're going to see great promotions there every single day. The app is safe and secure, and you're going to get paid instantly, which you will love. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Just go to FanDuel.com/NBCSB and sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 21 plus in present and select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
Awesome stuff there from Jim Nagy. Thanks so much to him for sharing as much intel as he did with us on Keion White, Marte Mapu, Jake Andrews, Chad Ryland, 4 of the first 5 Patriots picks, and then, of course, Bryce Behringer as well, the punter that the Patriots took in the 6th round. It should be no surprise that the Patriots are taking as many Senior Bowlers as they're taking. Cole Strange, their first round pick last year from a smaller program. Worth noting, Mac Jones the year before, first pick of the draft in 2021 from the Senior Bowl. Kyle Duggar, first pick of that draft, 2020, second rounder, first pick from the Senior Bowl. Why do the Patriots value this particular week of work as much as they do when most of these players have years upon years of collegiate play in their backgrounds? Here's why. I think this is the quote that explains it best from Bill Belichick. This came in 2021 when he was asked about Kyle Duggar, and he explained why the Senior Bowl was so important to Duggar. And this is the obvious and extreme example, I would say, because Duggar comes from a Division II program at Lenoir-Rhyne, and they really needed to see how he would perform against better competition. But the same logic, in my opinion, applies to Cole Strange. It even applies to somebody like Mac Jones, who, yes, the Patriots are able to watch him in the SEC week after week perform against the best of the best. For the most part, that's going to carry enough weight for them to be able to spend or feel good about spending a first-round pick on a given player. But the week of the Senior Bowl is unique in that you can follow a player for a full week, see how they develop, how they grow, how they acquire information in a short period of time, and try to evaluate them on that alone. Obviously, somebody like Mac Jones spent a lot of time behind the scenes, learned, developed, grew, both mentally and physically, his understanding of the Alabama system, but of the game itself, understanding how his body works, and all of that helps him perform on the field. But at the Senior Bowl, where you're given a new playbook and a new set of teammates, it is a very good way of simulating what's going to happen to these guys when they become pros. So here's the quote from Bill Belichick on Kyle Duggar and how important the Senior Bowl was to Kyle Duggar's evaluation. Belichick said, "I think the Senior Bowl really helped Kyle. He was running a pro defense against a pro offense with soon-to-be pro players. Whether it was one-on-one drills, catching punts, tackling, I think you could really see he was able to compete very favorably at the level of competition, and his scheme represents something close to what we would be doing. It was a short window, but it was a full week of practice and a game. I think I saw a lot of improvement during the week, and I feel like this is a kid that's smart, works hard, that has a lot of ability. And without the Senior Bowl, it certainly would have been, for me, a lot tougher projection if he wouldn't have been able to do that." So again, smaller school players like Kyle Duggar and Cole Strange, they're going to benefit more from the Senior Bowl, exponentially more, I would think, from the Senior Bowl than somebody like Mac Jones or even Keion White. But there is still that following them through the week portion of the Senior Bowl, which to me is almost an added benefit on top of seeing them against the high-end competition that they see all week down there in Mobile, Alabama. It's being able to track their progress, see how they learn, see how they take coaching, see the attention of detail or the attention to detail that they're already pouring into their craft. Those are the kinds of things that I think you can track and track really closely when you're watching players day after day at the Senior Bowl, even if it's just 1 week. So we're sitting here talking about 5 Patriots draft picks, again, from the Senior Bowl. Again, another heavy investment in the Senior Bowl. When we continue to see it play out this way year after year after year, that quote from Bill Belichick should help explain why. Now let's get into why I think Keion White is one of the most interesting players for the Patriots in this year's draft class. Number one, the size just jumps off the screen, jumps off the page at you at 6'5", 285 pounds. Jim Nagy telling us he played at 292 during last season for the Yellow Jackets. And you can still see clips of this guy turning and running with wheel routes down the sideline, running backs out of the backfield, tracking them in coverage, close enough to make a play. That is mind-blowing athleticism. I don't think is overstating it. You just don't see that. This guy is built like a modern-day defensive tackle, and he's running 20, 30, 40 yards down the field with running backs. That is really, really impressive stuff. It's really, really rare. Just how rare? Funny you should ask. I wrote about this on NBCSportsBoston.com earlier this week. And if you go to our guy, Kent Lee Platt's relative athletic scores, I love referencing them here on the podcast and in my writing because I think it is the best measure that we have in the public sphere of being able to assess overall athleticism. When the Patriots drafted Kyle Duggar, there's that name again. When the Patriots drafted Kyle Duggar a couple years ago, we went to his athletic tests and we said, oh boy, this is clearly an NFL athlete, even though he was playing at the Division II level. He was a late bloomer. There's a whole background story to that. You know it by now in all likelihood. But his relative athletic score was elite, well over 9. It was 9.54. And this is stacked up against safeties historically, pre-draft testing, height, weight, speed. Measuring the jumps, you're measuring the change of direction drills, you're obviously measuring the 40, the 10-yard split. All of those things come together, and you come up with, at MathBomb, a.k.a. Kent Lee Platt's relative athletic score, 9.54 for Kyle Duggar. Know what it was for Keion White? 9.54 for defensive ends. It was actually 9.92 if you want to call him a defensive tackle. If you're one of these people who thinks he might be a 3 technique at the next level, you might have to play him inside and use him as a sub-rusher. I don't think that's how the Patriots are planning on using him. The reason they were considering him in the first round, and they were, of this year's draft, is because they see him as more of a do-everything kind of player than that. So they could play him on the edge. They could play him inside in sub situations if they want to rush him against interior offensive linemen, stubby little guards and centers. This guy's got 34-inch arms at 6'5", 280-ish pounds. Runs a 4.7 40, all kinds of explosiveness. So you could play him inside if you want to. You can play him out on the edge. He can set the edge. He can play in a 3-point stance. He can play in a 2-point stance. He did. Even at that size, he's 20 pounds heavier than Matthew Judon. But he's doing a lot of the same things you see Matthew Judon do in the Patriots defense. That's why I think he is such a fascinating player to track this spring and summer. How are the Patriots using him? Did they really think he can be Matt Judon at the next level? An edge setter on early downs, a pass rusher on third down, drop him into coverage a couple times a game just to mix up the look? Because that's what Judon is for the Patriots. He is their star. He's one of their most highly paid player. Because they think he can do everything. Do they think Keion White can do the same kinds of things? Do they think he can be as versatile? The athleticism would certainly indicate that he can. A 40 that was timed in the 4.7 range. Had one scout tell me he had him at a 4.72 at his pro day at 281 pounds. So he dropped basically 10 pounds from his in-season playing weight. But for his pro days at 280, that is still a jumbo, massive, gargantuan outside linebacker in Bill Belichick's system. Again, Matthew Judon's listed at 261. Dante Hightower was in the 265-ish range at times. But then there are others like Josh Uche, who's well below that as a sub Patriots defense as of right now. Who knows? Maybe there's more for him coming. Kyle Van Noy, 250 pounds. Really an every down edge guy for the Patriots. They used him on the ball and off as an inside linebacker as well. But when he was on the edge, he played on the edge quite a bit. Go back to 2018 when Dante Hightower was healthy and available. They bumped Van Noy down to the edge all the time. 250 pounds. This guy's 30 pounds heavier than that. 4.72. That's faster than the 40 time that Chandler Jones ran in 2012 by more than a tenth of a second. And Chandler Jones was 20 pounds lighter than this guy. And you know his athleticism is eye-popping when you talk to people through the league and they are surrounded by freaky athletes on a daily basis. And his athleticism is amazing even to them. So I spoke to one AFC defensive line coach who studied Keion White, interviewed Keion White. His team thought about drafting Keion White. And he told me this guy is jacked when we were talking about his weight, because even though he was almost 300 pounds at times for Georgia Tech, he just didn't look it because the way he was built, muscle throughout his frame. The quote continues, long arms, good long speed, good motor and finish, really smart. He's on the ground a little more than you would like. His turning, his balance, his change of direction is just okay. But smart, powerful, fast. A 4.72 at 281, that's pretty legit. Let me amend that last sentence. That is very legit. It's very rare. Bill Belichick, who is no stranger to drafting elite athletes and doing so early, has only drafted 7 players in his entire tenure with the Patriots, 7 players in the first or second round who had better relative athletic scores than Keion White. Again, you can make the argument Kyle Duggar's the best pound-for-pound athlete on the roster right now. And Keion White has the same relative athletic score that Duggar does. That, to me, is certainly worthy of a second-round pick. Now, if they had actually taken him in the first round, would we be sitting here and picking apart his game more than we are right now? I'm sure we would be, because he's a bit of an old-school 4-3 defensive end. And he's somebody who is on the ground a little bit. You know, his coordination or his contact balance for somebody who's as big as he is isn't otherworldly. And it's why, even at his speed, I don't think you would want to use him. I think people are getting confused with his 40 time and seeing that and projecting him as a edge/inside linebacker, the way Dante Hightower was. Can't change of direction. His lateral quickness isn't really on that level where, in my opinion, you would want to use him that way. Right? He is a bull in a china shop. He plays angry, which the Patriots love. He's somebody who's going to crush the pocket. So he's going to try to drive through the middle of offensive tackles and tight ends. If a team decides to use a tight end to try to block him, which I would say is probably a bad idea, but it happens all the time in the NFL. But against some of these mobile quarterbacks, whether it's Josh Allen or even Aaron Rodgers at this stage, somebody who can extend the play even if he's not necessarily looking to scramble for yardage on a regular basis. And we know that the league is littered with quarterbacks who are those types of athletes. Want to just extend, step up, step to the side, roll out. Well, in Bill Belichick's defense, what does he want to do? He wants to crush the pocket. He wants to envelop quarterbacks with their own offensive linemen by driving them backward. Keion White is perfect for that kind of system. He really is. His demeanor, his playing style, his motor, he is relentless. That's exactly what the Patriots want. Explosiveness, power, long arms, get those blockers and drive them back into the quarterback's lap. That's the best way to stop a mobile quarterback. But off the ball, spying somebody like Josh Allen just because he ran a 4.7, that to me is a much, much more difficult ask, because you are changing direction and you're trying to mirror the movements of somebody who's really light on their feet. That's not necessarily the descriptor I would use for Keion White. Elite athlete, I don't think you'd use him in that manner. The manner you would use him in, what I was told, the manner the Patriots have used Dietrich Wise. Same assistant coach that I spoke to for this story about Keion White tells me this. I would think he pushes Dietrich Wise for playing time. He could kick inside and play next to Christian Barmore on passing downs when Josh Uche comes on the field. He gives them some flexibility. He has real straight line speed. I'd say he has more juice than Wise, but Wise is probably stouter in the run game. He'll be good in that New England system where they can move him around. So again, size, power, versatility, intelligence. Guy had an above average Wonderlic score. Whatever you think of the Wonderlic, it is what it is. The league feels he is a very smart player and somebody who'd be able to handle a lot. If you go back to our episode with Rob Ninkovich talking about what you need to play on the edge in Bill Belichick's defense, the first thing he mentioned was what you have above the shoulders, because Bill Belichick's going to ask you to do a lot of different things. He certainly asked Rob Ninkovich to do a lot of different things. I'm anticipating the same will be true for Keion White, and the reason the Patriots felt comfortable taking him in the first or in the second round and might have taken him in the first round is because they know how smart he is. And you get that sense just from talking to him for 5 minutes, which we did after he was drafted. And he's very businesslike in his approach. He's business-minded in what he wants to do off the field. He's talking about investing in property. He's talking about playing in such a way and handling his finances in such a way where he can be financially free and he can play more freely on the field so that it doesn't come up or it doesn't pop up in his own brain that, hey, I better do this on game day or else I'm not going to get X number of dollars on my next contract. He said he doesn't want to have to worry about that and that he shouldn't have to because of all these other investments that he has going on. Not the typical sorts of talking points that we hear from Bill Belichick's draft picks immediately after the fact. And you can sit here and say, oh, it shows he's not focused enough on football. And maybe that docked him in some front offices. That wouldn't surprise me in all honesty, the way some of these football people like to think. But clearly it didn't scare off the Patriots. And that intelligence will be used to leverage all of these rare physical gifts that he has to be deployed in a variety of different situations. Now, his demeanor, again, I mentioned he has a business-like approach. His demeanor, to me, is really interesting because he is very serious. And I spoke to multiple people in the league, and Jim Nagy even alluded to this. That reaction that he had just sitting on the couch with the stoic look on his face. It looks like a pretty tough guy, right? He is a tough guy. And it's my understanding that that video, and Keion White even said this himself to us right after the draft, is pretty indicative of who he is. He mentioned it right after the fact. He said, I don't know if you all have seen on TV, but I'm a pretty chill person. I'm not very explosive in excitement in any form. And it goes beyond that, is my understanding. Spoke to one team who said he really doesn't have any tolerance for teammates, quote unquote, bleeping up. And it's essentially what I was told, college kids acting like college kids, because it just wasn't his way of going about things. This is a guy who worked as a Domino's delivery guy to earn a few extra bucks when he was at Old Dominion playing as a tight end. And now he's had all sorts of other professional experiences. And he hasn't even made his way to his first post-college career here. Worked as a construction estimator from 2001 to the summer of 2022 in Atlanta. This is all on his LinkedIn page. The guy's LinkedIn page is all kinds of updated. Much more so than I'm willing to bet my own or many of you that are listening to this right now. He was a financial analyst or had a financial analyst internship at McKinney's in Atlanta. So he goes from Old Dominion to Atlanta. Maybe he's interested in going to Atlanta because he wants to invest in some of the properties and some of the other business opportunities that he has there in what is a major hub, obviously. But he's also using that time for all these off-the-field developmental experiences. Professional guy, business-like, business approach. Doesn't tolerate people who don't take their craft seriously. I was told that even verged on being combative at times. But you know what? Doesn't that sound like the kind of guy Bill Belichick would like to have in his locker room? All right, so that to me is the Keion White story. I'm sure we'll get to know him much, much better over the course of time here, and we'll have more on Keion White for you here on this very podcast. We'll be tracking him, like I said, very closely. Maybe more closely than anyone else in this year's draft class in terms of how he's used. That to me is the TBD storyline for Keion White. We know where Christian Gonzalez is going to be. We know even the late round receivers, in all likelihood, where they will be aligned. But Keion White, is he just the eventual Dietrich Wise replacement? Is he a 3-down outside linebacker opposite Matthew Judon? Is he Matthew Judon insurance? Is he Josh Uche's eventual replacement? Because Uche, to me, again, he's a sub-rusher, really. That's what he's been. Is that what they think Keion White's going to be? I kind of doubt, but we'll see. Also, just wanted to mention to you guys quickly before we go that we do on NBCSportsBoston.com have a full 17-game prediction on the website right now for your New England Patriots. The results, not sure you're going to be thrilled with them. I do think you will think they are realistic. I have them at 9-8. It's a 1-game improvement over last year. Do I think that is representative of the improvements they've made this offseason? I don't. Bill O'Brien in for Matt Patricia and Joe Judge is a massive, massive improvement. And it should, on paper, present better than a 1-game improvement on their record. I just think that the Patriots' schedule, which is the toughest in the NFL when you look at Vegas win totals and what teams are projected for, not looking at 2022 and looking at their current schedule for 2023 and assigning all those win totals from last year to this year. That's not how it works. It's not a good way of doing it. There's too much turnover. There's too much change. Coaching staffs, quarterbacks, looking at last year's records is not a great way of doing it. Now, the Patriots had a very difficult record if you were to do it that way. And so the change for them isn't all that different, one versus the other. But just do me this solid and don't project difficulty or strength of schedule based on last year's results. Do it based on the Vegas win totals because of the projection that's obviously involved. Patriots have the toughest schedule in the league. And their division rival made maybe the biggest upgrade at the most important position in the entire league, going from Zach Wilson and Mike White and whatever else they had on the roster to Aaron Rodgers, even at this stage of Aaron Rodgers' career. So what looks like it should be a more than one game improvement to me ends up that way because everybody else has gotten better. So you split with the Dolphins, you split with the Jets, you beat the Raiders in Vegas, but you still only make it to your Week 11 bye at 500, at 5-5, in part because you have a daunting early season schedule. I have the Patriots going 1-3 in their first 4, beating the Dolphins, as a matter of fact. Now, I've got scores for all these games, so as ridiculous as that is, hand up. I know it's ridiculous, but we do it anyway because it's fun and because it gets you thinking. But I went back, and after doing all the scores, one number that stood out to me was I averaged the points allowed totals for Patriots opponents, and the average was 20.4. You know what's interesting about that number? First of all, that's a very good number for any defense. Leave the season allowing only 20.4 points per game. They would, in all likelihood, be pretty happy with that. That's most seasons going to land you in the top 10 in the NFL. It's the exact same number they had last year, and that was not purposely done, but that's who they were defensively last year. I think the defense has gotten better. Christian Gonzalez is going to help them. I think help them immensely. Some of the matchups that they really weren't able to handle last year. So I have faith in the Patriots defense. I have faith that the Patriots offense will be better. I'm just not sure, based on the coaching this year, as it was last year. But I think based on the weaponry, I'm just not sure they have enough. Do they have enough in the way of firepower, especially at the receiver position, to be able to contend with some of these high-flying offenses? That's why I have the Patriots right around 500. Is that good enough to make the postseason? We'll see. It was last year. Had they won that season finale in Buffalo, they're in. So 9-8 could get them in. But if you've got potentially, I guess, a double-digit Jets team in terms of double-digit wins, you have the Bills. I think we all assume will be at the top of the division again, although they're not invincible by any stretch. Then maybe it's harder. Maybe it is harder to sneak in with 9. But that's where I have them. You tell me where I'm wrong. Leave us a comment on the YouTube page. Love interacting with the YouTube crowd. Leave us a comment on our Apple Podcast page. Leave us a review, too. Could you do us that solid? Leave us that 5-star review. I would be forever grateful. And if you leave a question in the comment section with that 5-star review, let's throw it on the pod. Let's get that thing read. Let's get that thing answered. Okay? I know that's all the coaxing you need, right? Harry, I'm going to go out of my way to leave you a 5-star review just so I can get a question answered when I could ask you the same thing on Twitter. In all likelihood, you're going to respond. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm saying. All right. Comment, no comment, review, no review. We love you all anyway. We don't love you equally. We love the commenters more and the reviewers more. That's for sure. But we do love you all. We'll talk to you next time. We're going to have many more interviews. We got a bunch lined up for you guys. We're talking to Christian Gonzalez, head coach. We're talking to City So's head coach. We're talking to Jake Andrews, offensive coordinator. Some fascinating intel about some of these players that I know you're still dying to learn more about. So stick with us here on Next Path. We'll talk to you next time.